we're going to get into a really nice groove. This is so exciting. So again, if you have any images you'd like me to edit, simply go to phlearn.com/live. Go ahead and post your name and your question, as well as your image, and I can start working on your photos. All right, are we good to go, team? Yeah. My wonderful team here. Cool, this is so much fun. All right, so we're gonna get started. I'm gonna start with Aurora Anderson Photography. That's gonna be our first question. Asks, how do we get, this is from the live chat, but I'll switch to the other ones. How did you get started in photography? That's a great question. So my start in photography was actually taking self-portraits. I purchased my first camera in 2008. Back then, Flickr was like a huge site for photo sharing, and I was like, okay, I want to learn photography. I don't want to bother anyone else with this, so I'm going to take self-portraits. So I used a little timer, got a little remote, and just started taking pictures of myself. After a couple months, I ran into a blog run by David Hobby called Srgb. He was teaching people how to use like little hot shoe flashes off camera using things like Pocket Wizards. And from there, I just basically started experimenting with lights, and I started a project. It was called a 365-day project where I took a picture of myself every single day for a year. And I decided to be a little bit creative. Now, I went to school for design, so I was using a lot of like the Photoshop knowledge that I learned in school combined with my self-portraits, and basically just tried to create the most interesting images I could using just myself for an entire year. And after doing that every single day for a year, I felt I was, I got the hang of like photography, got the hang of lighting, felt, reasonably confident in Photoshop, and that was my time to say, okay, cool, now it's time to start photographing other people. So after my first year, basically just started booking like local family and friends and coming up with ideas, and hey, Bobby, I don't actually know anyone named Bobby, but let's go ahead and let's do a photo shoot together. I've got a cool idea. Is this something you want to be a part of? In the beginning, it was all just like totally free. I wasn't getting paid for photos. No one was getting paid. We were just like hanging out as friends and taking pictures of each other and having fun with it. So that kind of progressed, and obviously I love Photoshop and photography. And as the years went by, my ideas got bigger and bigger. Business grew, and gotten to the point where now we've got this wonderful studio. Maybe we can switch back to the webcam view. We've got our wonderful studio here in Chicago, Illinois. We do all kinds of badass photo shoots here, as well as our Photoshop tutorials. So I gotta say, I'm pretty dang thankful. I got a good. My dream has come true and is currently coming true as well, now live on TV. So pretty cool. But again, it all started with just like hobby and something I love to do, taking pictures of myself. Cool. Great questions, guys. All right. So we've got our first question. This is from phlearn.com/live. This is Goran from Australia asks, is there a certain trend or mood that keeps coming back into photography as time goes on? If so, what are they? Cheers from Australia. Well, Goran, cheers from Australia. A certain trend or mood that comes back into photography. And I gotta say, like, when I look at images that I've done, maybe we can switch this over to my screen. If folks are watching out there on the internet and are interested to see some of the photos that I've taken, so a lot of you guys know me as a Photoshop guy, and that's pretty applicable because I love Photoshop and I've made a lot of videos teaching Photoshop, but I'm also an avid photographer. So if you're interested in seeing my photography, just head over to aaronnace.com. It's AARON-nace.com, and you can see some of my work. So this is the stuff that I'm interested in doing. These are pictures that I've taken over the last few years. And when I look at my own work, when I look at other people's work, the thing that seems to be like the glue that holds it all together is some sort of emotional response, whether it's a landscape, a portrait, a conceptual image, a still life, a macro, whatever it is. if you can get across some type of emotion through your photograph, I think you've got a really great chance at connecting with your viewer. Now, I look at photos that were taken, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, guys, and they're usually like slightly out of focus. They're usually not super a lot of the time they're grainy. Most of the time they're black and white. Some of the time the lighting isn't even that great. But a lot of those photos that really tend to transcend time express emotion, and when you look at these photos, you feel something from these photos. So with my own work, that's something that I try to do. I try to convey some sort of emotion in my own photos. Now, I'm a big fan of photographing people. I think it's a lot of fun, but landscape photography, macro photography, whatever it is, if you can aim for expressing actual emotion in your photo and getting the viewer to feel something when they look at your photo, I think you've got a really great chance at creating a work of art that is going to stand the test of time. Cool. All right. Great question. And our questions keep rolling in, guys. Rolling in. Okay, so our next question comes from Michael from Karst, Germany. He's asking, I'm doing a lot of bracketed shots. I'd like to automate the creation of HDR images from them so I can let the machine work through the night and have the results in the morning. Can Photoshop do that? Do I need additional tools, or can you give me an idea on how to automate that? Okay, Michael, great question. Now, the newest version of Lightroom will actually combine multiple shots together for you. You can stitch HDR shots directly in Photoshop. There are actually programs out there that do automate this, and a friend of mine who's a landscape photographer I know uses one of these programs that automates that automates HDR stuff as well as landscape stuff. I'm actually not aware. I don't know the name of the program, unfortunately. Hopefully someone can chime in on the chat on YouTube and oh, Aaron, you should probably know that. If you guys know the name of this program that can automate HDR. I know there is a program out there. I forgot the name of it. Also, in Photoshop, you can most definitely automate things. You can create scripts and batch process within Photoshop and run actions. So let's go ahead and switch to Photoshop real quick. Now, this isn't something that I do very often, but here in Photoshop, we'll just kind of guide you through the basic idea of it. And we do have tutorials on Phlearn.com for batch processing and running scripts. So I'm going to go to File. We're going to go down to Automate. Okay, and then we're going to go to a batch. Okay, now here within your batch processing, what you can do, this is actually really cool, you can set an action. So for instance, if you create an action that merges HDR photos, so basically what you want to do is run an HDR merge photo and have your action playing at the same time. And if you're interested in learning how to create actions, go to Phlearn.com. In the search bar up at the top right, just type in actions, that's ACTIONS, and we've got a lot of great free tutorials on how to create actions, so you can get an idea of what actions are used for and how to create them. Then you can create batch actions. So in this example, I'm just going to use this topmost selection that says vignette. Okay, so a default action, you can run it a vignette, and then you can just choose an entire folder. So let's say I want to choose a folder here. I could choose a folder on my desktop, and it's going to run this action on every single image in that folder. So for instance, you can create multiple folders and have those batch through to create your HDR shots. Okay, awesome question. So there definitely are a few ways to automate this, and I know it can take quite a while to do automation of HDR shots. So yeah, I definitely feel you there. Okay, that is a great question. All right. Switching back to our live broadcast. Oh, okay, great. Travel2 says, automating HDR easily batched with Photo Matrix. Okay, Photo Matrix. Cool, so that answers your question. This is the awesome thing about live broadcasts, is that if I don't know something, there's a good chance that all those thousands of people out there watching it will know the answer to that question. So it's a really cool, and I'm super glad that we're been able to build this community of people that can help each other out. So really, really fun there. All right, we are on to our very next question. Okay, so our next question comes from Eden in Israel, Eden is asking, how can I make the sunrise more noticeable in this photo? How can I change the highlights and the shadows to add the atmosphere? All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at your images. So Eden submitted this image, went to phlearn.com/live, and I'm going to open Eden's image, and we're going to start working on it here in Photoshop. All right, if you're interested in me editing your image live here on Phlearn Live, just go to phlearn.com/live and submit your image. Okay, so the question is, how can I make the sunrise more noticeable in the photo? How can I change the highlight and the shadows to add more atmosphere? Great question. So the first thing we're going to do is work with a filter that's called highlight/shadow. This is actually, it's a really, really cool filter. So I'm going to duplicate my background layer. We don't want our background layer affected. That's pretty much just good practice in Photoshop. You pretty much always want to create a copy of your background. So we're going to duplicate our background layer. There we go. And now I'm going to go to Image. We're going to go to Adjustments, and I'm going to go down to Shadows/Highlights. Okay, Image, Adjustments, and then Shadows/Highlights. Now, this is a great place where you can adjust the values of your shadows and highlights. And you probably saw pretty much immediately we were able to get a lot more information out of our shadows. So here you can adjust the amount of brightening with your shadows, and in my opinion, this filter does a really great job. It's a very realistic filter, and it does a good job bringing more information into your shadows. And it doesn't look fake. It doesn't look weird. So we can see this is the original photo. We're going to increase the amount of brightness here in the shadows. You can change your tone here and your radius as well. A larger radius will give you more of like an HDR feel. A smaller radius will be like more detail in each individual area of the photo. So we're just going to go ahead and bring those up there. Now you can also increase the color in your shadows as well. Let's go ahead and bring our color up just a little bit. Okay, that looks great. So we can see already we've added a lot more detail into the shadows, which is nice, and we haven't affected our highlights. Now you also wanted to make the sunrise more noticeable in this photo. So one thing I would suggest doing, and this is really easy, is creating a photo filter. So I'm going to go to Image, down to Adjustments, and we're going to go to Photo Filter. Now this is a great place where you can make an image either warmer or cooler. So here we can see we've got our filter. Now the first filter it's going to pull up is our warming filter, 85, which is what I would recommend using. So here's our warming filter, and you can change the density here of your filter as well. So obviously if you go too high, it's going to look horrible, so don't do that. We're going to keep this somewhere between 25 and 30% and hit OK on that as well. So making this visible and invisible, we can see we've got a photo filter. Now I applied that directly onto the layer. If you want to create an adjustment layer, you can go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then you can do a photo filter as an adjustment layer, which means you can change that at any time. Okay, so there's our photo filter. Now, another thing that you can do if you really want to like start warming up your image, especially when it comes to like the highlights and the shadows, is use a curves adjustment layer and adjust the colors within a curves adjustment layer. So we're going to go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to go to Curves. There we go. Now, a lot of folks know that when you're editing with curves in Photoshop, you can make your image brighter and darker. So I'm going to make this a little brighter, a little bit darker, so we get an idea there. But you can also adjust colors in your image. So you can do that by going to RGB right here. You can adjust your red channel, your green channel, and your blue channel. So let's go ahead and take a look at our red channel first. I'm going to click on our red channel. I'm going to click here in the middle and just drag this up, which is going to add a little bit more red into my image. Now if I drag this down, it's going to put the opposite, which is cyan. So when you think about like a sunset, you've got like red and orange and yellow kind of like bringing into your image. So my goal here is I'm going to add a little bit more red and a little bit more yellow, get that like nice orange feel to the photo. Okay. Now this is in the very middle, so this is just adding more red or less red to the whole image. Now you can also do this with your highlights and your shadows. So as I take my highlights and drag this down, you're going to see we're adding more cyan into the highlights. If I drag this from the right to the left, we're going to add more red into the highlights. I can do this with my shadows as well. So I'm going to click here and drag this up. This is going to add some red into the shadows. Okay, obviously this is a lot more than you would actually want to use. And I'm going to click and drag this to the right, and it's going to add some cyans into the shadows. So I'm going to put a little bit of red in my highlights and a little bit of red in my shadows. Next, we're going to go to our blue channel. Now, if I click here and drag up, it's going to add more blue into my image. If I click here and drag down, it's going to add more yellow into my image. Okay, so I can also use the highlights and shadows here. So I can make the highlights a little bit more yellow. There we go, simply by dragging this down. Okay, and I can also add a little bit of blue into my shadows if I'd like as well, giving us a little bit more of like a sunlight effect. So let's just make this visible and invisible there. Now, if any of these adjustments that I'm making, if they're too strong, you can simply lower the opacity. That's not difficult to do there. Simply lower the opacity. So this is obviously like a pretty quick example on how to do this. You could also let's do one more adjustment layer, and we're going to use a gradient layer mask and have this visible here in the center. So we'll do one more. I'm going to go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer. We're going to go to Curves. Okay, and I'm going to add a bit more red, and then we're going to really pull the blue down. There we go. All right, so this is basically creating a little bit more red and yellow. Now, this is going to be visible in the entire image, but we don't have to have an adjustment layer visible on an entire image. We can have this just be visible in a certain area. So I'm going to click on my layer mask and hit Control or Command I to invert the layer mask. Okay, then I'm going to use my gradient tool to basically, we're going to go to our gradient editor. I'm going to click on my foreground to transparent gradient editor. So here we have our foreground color is white. To transparent, hit OK, and I'm going to click on my radial gradient. So we're going to be going from white to transparent with a radial gradient here on the layer mask. So if I click here in the middle and drag this out, there we go. Oh, I want to make sure I don't have reverse checked. If I click here in the middle and drag that out, we can see I can add this color, and it's just going to show up. There we go. It's just going to show up in the area that I use my gradient. So we can kind of bring this out. You can also use a linear gradient and have this go just from the top down. So if you want just a little bit more color in the sky, you can have that only be visible in part of the image as well. All right, and I'm just going to bring the saturation down just a little bit on this image because it's just a little bit too high. It's looking a little bit non-realistic. Okay, great. Well, Eden, that was a really great question. So let's go ahead and group those together. Again, we're using a photo filter, a couple curves adjustment layers, and then I lowered the saturation at the end. So we're going to make that invisible. So you can see this is our before image, okay? And here is our after image. And again, I do suggest doing the before and after because whenever I do this, I'm like, you know what? It looks good, but it's a little bit too strong of an effect. So what I would do is just lower the opacity of all those effects there. So again, here's our before and our after. And to me, it looks like a much brighter, more sunset type image. Cool. Well, I hope that helped out. And Eden, thank you for your wonderful question. How's this going, guys? Pretty good? Is everything thumbs up, double thumbs up?
Great questions.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. Great questions. And again, if you have Photoshop or photography related questions, I'm going to be monitoring this chat, but obviously like we've got folks here that are, helping out, like sending me the questions and things like that. So if you have an image you'd like me to edit, simply submit it, go to phlearn.com/live, and you can upload your image there as well. All right. Cool. Great questions, guys. All right, we ready for our next question? Okay. Our next question comes from O'Day in the Ukraine. Asks, what's your go-to technique for getting the best looking skin tone on the face, especially retouching for really bad acne, blemishes, and large patches of different colored skin? That is a great question. Okay, let's go ahead and get into that. Now, I don't have any images here, so I'm going to just go to Adobe Stock real quick, and we're going to get an image, and I'll just work on it here. All right. So this question is about skin tone, guys. What's your suggestion when working on skin tone? So you know what? We're going to choose this image, which is, there we go. Obviously has a little bit of skin tone issues here. And I'm going to go ahead and license that. And then I'll open it in Photoshop. So this is our sample image to answer your skin tone question. So let's go ahead and open that. All right. Cool. So again, Ode asks, what's your technique for getting the best looking skin tone on the face for acne and blemishes and things like that? Ode, this is a great question, and it's something that we run into all the time as photographers. Now, basically, redness is caused from blood in your face, and everyone's got blood, you know, under their skin. And sometimes, if it's like really cold out, or if you've got acne, rosacea, things like that, the blood tends to rush to the front of your face, creating a little bit of redness. So the first thing I suggest doing is targeting those red areas and then turning those red areas into skin tone. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's actually not too difficult. So we've got our background layer. The first thing I'm going to do, we're going to go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and over to Hue Saturation, because I want to select a specific color. So Hue Saturation, and hit OK. Okay, now with our Hue Saturation, let's go ahead and spread this out a little bit wider so you guys can see what we're doing here. With our Hue Saturation Adjustment layer, you're going to see a couple of things that we're going to go from the top down here. So starting off with a few presets. So you've got a preset here for default, and you can change these presets. I wouldn't recommend doing that. You don't need to mess with that for now. The next thing we need to look at is master, and what we need to understand there is this is adjusting the color on the entire image. So if I, for instance, take the hue slider and take this and drag it to the left or the right, we're going to see it's going to adjust the color on our entire image, which obviously is not what we want to do. But you can see how powerful this tool is. We can basically turn that red color into any other color. So that's with set to master. It's going to adjust the red, or it's going to adjust all the colors on the image. Now, what we want to do is we want to target just the reds in our photo, and just the reds that really don't look that great. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to click on master, and I'm going to go down to where it says reds. Okay, so now we're just going to be editing the reds. And I want to refine this selection even more. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to click on the red that I actually want to affect. And you're going to see our sliders down here are going to start to move. So keep an eye on these sliders. I'm going to move my eyedropper tool around the photo, and you're going to see that the sliders on the bottom are actually moving around too. And that's because those sliders indicate where is actually going to be affected by our Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. Okay, now what it's doing here is it's going to turn this color on the top slider into the color on the bottom slider. So let me just go ahead and click here on our acne. There we go. And I'm going to now adjust the hue on our acne. Now we can see it's still affecting too much, right? It's not just getting the little pimples and things like that. It's actually affecting everything. So we want to bring that back to 0. We can actually identify just the red areas. So what we want to do here, we want to really hone in and just affect those red areas. And we can do that by adjusting those sliders on the bottom of our screen. So let's go ahead and do that. So our sliders here, I'm going to crank up my hue and saturation, and I'm only doing this so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, now it's affecting everything. But these sliders on the bottom of your screen, basically in here in the middle, this is the area that is going to get affected 100%. And then these areas out here, this is going to feather your effect out. And you can make your slider even wider. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and bring this wider just so we can see what we're actually doing here. Now, what I want to do is I want to narrow the area between these little panels. Okay, so let's click here, and I'm going to drag that in. We're going to click here and drag this in as well. And what this is essentially doing is it's telling this, I don't want to affect all the reds in my image. I only want to affect certain reds in my image. There we go. Now I can also click in here and move this around. So you can see as I move this around, now we're not affecting all of the skin tone, okay? We can target this to just affect certain areas of skin tone. So I'm going to bring this to, you can see, like as I bring this from left to the right, and this is so cool, right? You can actually start to see those like quote unquote problem areas start to get highlighted. So what you really want to do is you want to move your sliders to highlight those problem areas. And once those are highlighted, then you're ready to move the hue and the saturation sliders to make sure that's corrected. Okay, so let's go ahead and turn these back to 0. So we've got our slider. Keep in mind, these sliders here on the bottom, this is like how you target specific colors. So let's go ahead and bring these back to 0. So we're going to bring both of those back to 0. Now what I want to do to start off with, I want to take this red color, okay, this is our red hue. I can move it over to a little bit more of like an orange color. I can move it over to more of skin tone. So I'm going to take my slider here and just move this to the right a little bit. So you can see here it's really red. I'm just going to move that to the right a little bit. Okay, now I can also lighten those areas up. So simply click on this and I can lighten those areas up, and I can change my saturation of those areas as well. So by targeting just those colors, there we go, I'm able to lighten those up, and all of a sudden we have a lot better skin tone. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to close this out so we can just see there's a quick before and after. So here's our before and our after. All right, now this is insanely cool because I didn't use a clone stamp tool, I didn't use a healing brush tool, I didn't use any like fancy tool or anything like that. All I did was I targeted those red areas and I changed them to the skin tone of our image. So that's going to be your first step. Now you can, after this, you can then go in and use like a healing brush tool and other tools like that to actually like work on the little like you know, any skin imperfections that you have. But we've changed our color, so we've basically fixed the red problem in our image. So let's go ahead and back in this image. I'm going to lower the opacity just a little bit, and I can click on my layer mask now. I want to paint black on my layer mask over the lips, right? Because obviously we want the lips to have some color in them. It's not going to look that great if our lips are that color as well. Okay, so we've taken care of a lot of the redness in our skin. Now we still have some areas that we'd like to go in, some like blemish areas. So I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to use our spot healing brush tool. And this is going to be our tool for removing some of these little problem areas. So I'm going to simply zoom in and paint over these areas now. Now I recommend starting off with the spot healing brush tool because it's really easy. You just click on your spot healing brush tool. You want to make sure you have sample all layers checked, as well as content aware. And then all you have to do here is just paint over the blemishes. Just paint right over the areas you'd like to remove. And the spot healing brush tool is going to figure out where to sample in the rest of the image, and it's going to fill in those areas with what it thinks will work. So it's not a perfect tool. It's basically controlled by AI wherever it thinks you should be using the skin. But if it doesn't do exactly the job you want, like if it doesn't do a perfect job, all you have to do is simply paint over that area again, and you're good to go. All right, let's go ahead and there we go. Paint a couple areas here. All right, so you can see in this example, we started off with skin tone that definitely needed a lot of work. All right, and in just a few minutes, we're able to completely reduce all these issues with his skin, which is really, really cool. So again, start off with a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. Anytime you have excessive redness or things like that on your image, start off with a Hue Saturation layer, Adjustment layer, and then come in with a Spot Healing Brush tool to reduce these little areas. So now I don't have to worry about the redness or anything like that because I've already done that with our Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. All right, pretty cool. Let's go ahead and zoom out There we go. And we can see, that looks pretty dang good. What do you guys think? Can you see this? All the folks in the room. I'm like, I hope the folks on the internet like what this has done as well. So really, really cool. O'Day, great question. So let's go ahead and group those together. We'll show you the before and the after. So let's hit F for full screen. Okay, here's our before and the after. So you can see it really didn't take that long to completely transform the skin tone. So again, start off by selecting and targeting those red areas with the Hue Saturation Adjustment layer, and then you can move in with a healing brush tool. So if you're interested in like a little bit of a replay of this, we're going to be rebroadcasting this entire thing, but you can also go to Phlearn.com, and in the little search bar on the top right, just type in red, and we've got episodes on how to reduce redness in skin. So you basically watch a pre-recorded tutorial on how to do something very similar to this image. All right, guys. Cool. This is so much fun. All right. I'm going to read a couple things from our chat room. Greetings from El Salvador. Hey, Emma. Good to meet you. F. Allen Young says, awesome technique. Solomon Burry says, pretty nice, Aaron is live. Let's get nerdy. What is the best practice for using higher gamut spaces, ProPhoto RGB, LAB, and why? Actually, that's a really great question. This is a question coming in from the chat here on YouTube. So we got a question about using color spaces. Now, for those of you who are interested in color spaces, basically, there are a few different color spaces you can work with. Now, when you're uploading something on the internet, that's a color space known as sRGB. So anything on the internet is going to be reading as sRGB color space. Now, that S means it's small. Okay, that's an easy way to remember it. So the internet doesn't, basically the internet browsers won't allow you to use a ton of colors. So when you're uploading something to the internet, you want to use sRGB. But when you're editing your images, you want to make sure you're editing in either Adobe RGB 1998 or ProPhoto RGB. So I'm going to pull up an article here. Let's see. There we go. And I recommend this article for anyone who's interested in understanding RGB values and just getting a little bit more nerdy. This is it's a website called the Luminous Landscape.com. It's a really, really great website. I can actually put this in. There we go. So you guys can follow along with me on this website here. Basically, it's a really great website for nerding out for photography. But if you scroll down, this guy talks about the differences between sRGB, ProPhoto RGB, and how cameras work with that, as well as how computers render that as well. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you guys here. Does anyone know how I can zoom in? Do you guys know how I can zoom in on my screen? Command plus. All right. Command plussed it. Okay. So for you guys interested in working with different color spaces, this is a really great image that shows you the color spaces and how they actually work. So you can see here we have sRGB, which is a small color space. It includes this many colors. Adobe RGB includes this many colors, and ProPhoto RGB includes this many colors. So it's pretty obvious from looking at this graph that ProPhoto RGB contains the most amount of colors possible. So what does that all mean? When you're editing your images from your camera to Lightroom or Aperture, whatever you're using, to Photoshop, I highly recommend editing your images in 16-bit, which is the largest, it's going to include a lot more information than 8-bit. And I also highly recommend working in ProPhoto RGB. This is just going to allow you to work with the most colors you possibly can. Now, if you've ever experienced things like banding, where you're like editing your colors and you start to like actually see lines in your gradients, that happens from working with not enough information. So as long as you're working in 16-bit and ProPhoto RGB, you really shouldn't have those issues. So anytime you're doing like skin correction work or, you know, like really, well, basically any type of color work, I highly recommend working in ProPhoto RGB. Now you can print directly from ProPhoto RGB. It's going to display really nicely on your screen. When you go to convert that to the internet, you can't upload an image to the internet in ProPhoto RGB. It's going to look really weird. So if any of you guys have edited your images, you're like, man, this is really great. It looks so beautiful. The colors are perfect. And then you went and uploaded it to the internet and all the colors are weird. I'm sure that's happened to you, some of you guys. It totally happened to me in the beginning before I knew about color space. The key here is to use sRGB color space. So again, for editing your images, ProPhoto RGB is where you want to be. When it's time to upload those to the internet, sRGB. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's switch back here into Photoshop. There we go. Let's say this is our masterpiece. We want to upload it to Facebook so we can get all the likes. We're going to go to File, and then we're going to go to Export, and I'm going to go to Save for Web. Okay, Save for Web. Now, the reason I love the Save for Web dialog is because by default, we have a box right here that says Convert to sRGB. So it knows I want to put this image on the internet. It's going to convert it to sRGB because that's what internet browsers use to read color space. So here in this Save for Web devices, you can select whether you want to put it out as a JPEG or a PNG. You can change your quality. You can change your image size here as well. So I'm going to put this image size, let's just make it 1600 pixels wide. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, I can adjust the percentage, the quality here, quality of anywhere between 80 and 90, you're good to go. It's going to compress it, but still look pretty good. And it's going to convert this to sRGB, which is great. Now, the other thing you can do within this dialog that I really, really like, down here on the bottom left of our screen, we have a preview button. Preview the optimized image in a browser. So I'm going to click on that preview button, and it's going to load that preview here in my browser. Now, this is really important because being able to preview your image in the browser before you upload it means you're going to be getting the highest quality image. If it looks right from your preview, it's going to look right on the internet. So it's going to push it in sRGB, go ahead and show you what it looks like in your browser, and you're good to go. So let's switch back to Photoshop here. There we go. So we've previewed our image, we've resized it. It says convert to sRGB, and I'm going to hit save. So we can go ahead and save that to our desktop. There we go. And when I load this online, Facebook, I'm going to get all the likes in the world because I've used the proper color space. Cool. That was a really great question. All right, we're ready for our next question. Now this is coming in from Phlearn.com/live. Okay, AJ from New York asks, my wife and I did a pregnancy photo shoot. 90% of the shots are out of focus and didn't get retouched. I can't get the raw files from the photographer, so I'm curious, how can I fix and retouch this JPEG? Oh, AJ, I feel you, man. Yeah, out of focus shots and they won't give you the raw files. That is a total bummer. Well, we've got an image from you, so let's go ahead and take a look at what your image looks like here. All right, we're going to open this up and look at AJ's photo from the pregnancy photo shoot. This is the JPEG. This is all you got here. Cool. Great image. I definitely see what you mean. It is a little bit out of focus. Thankfully, it's a pretty good quality JPEG. I totally understand what you mean. It's not a raw file. We don't have as much information as we possibly could, but the JPEG actually does look pretty good. Okay. First, what I would recommend doing is a little bit of sharpening on this photo. Now, if a photo was taken and it's out of focus, there's not a ton you can do to like get it back in focus. Obviously, that's done in camera. But if something's slightly out of focus, you can most definitely sharpen the image, and it's going to look a lot better. So the easiest way to do this is with an unsharp mask. So what I would recommend is duplicating your background layer. Now you can do this in Photoshop. You can also do this in Lightroom by just increasing your sharpness, but in Photoshop you're going to have a lot more control. Okay, so I've duplicated our background layer. Now the next thing I'm going to do is turn this into a smart object. And the reason is, if I'm going to use a filter on a layer, I want to make sure it's a smart object because that'll make sure that I can change the properties of that filter at any point in time. Okay, so easy to do. Just right click here on our layer 1, okay? And I'm going to go to where it says convert to smart object. And again, a smart object will allow us to use a smart filter. So here we can see we've got our little icon on this layer letting us know that we are editing a smart object. Okay, so now that we've got our smart object, let's go ahead and run our unsharp mask. So I'm going to go to filter, we're going to go down to sharpen, and I'm going to go to unsharp mask. All right, and you're going to see pretty much immediately it's doing a really great job. Now here we can change the amount of sharpening. So if I go ahead and bring this down, we can see here's the original. I'll just zoom in a little bit so you guys get a better view of what's going on. You can increase your sharpening here in the photo. So as I go up and up and up, you can see we're increasing our sharpening. And this, again, it's not the same as the photo being in focus, but it will most definitely help out. Now we can also change our radius here. And the key is, if you choose a radius that's too small, it's not going to do much. If you choose a radius that's too large, it's going to look really weird. So be sure to go ahead and play with your radius, and it's a looks thing. You know, each image is going to be different. So like basically you want to increase your radius as much as possible until it starts to look really weird. Okay? And then threshold is like the pixels that are actually going to be sharpened. You can go ahead and leave that at 0. All right. We can see a little 100% preview of our image. Now you can see at 100% preview, it doesn't look that great, okay? If you're going to be printing this super large, I would probably lower the sharpening amount a little bit. But if you're not going to be making it that large, focus on the overall image. Don't worry about the preview itself. So focus on the overall image. Now, let me make this layer invisible and visible again. And you can see that our sharpening definitely did make the image look like it's a little more in focus. Now, I've got a couple of suggestions here. One, remember how we turned this into a smart object, okay? And we did that because I applied the unsharp mask to this actual layer. Now, because it's a smart object, the unsharp mask was applied as a smart filter, which means I can change the unsharp mask at any point in time. So let's go ahead and show you how to do that. So jumping back in, we can see we've got our smart filter here. Okay, I can turn my filters on and off. There we go. If I want to change my unsharp mask at any time, I can simply double click on my unsharp mask and change the values. Let's say we decided it was too sharp or not sharp enough. We can always go back in here and change these values at any point in time. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Now, also, we don't need this unsharp mask. I don't need this visible on the entire image because honestly, the trees in the background and stuff like that, I'm okay with that not being sharpened. So I'm going to put a layer mask on this layer. You can do that by clicking on your layer mask icon right down here, or go to Layer, down to Layer Mask, and over to Reveal All, which will create a white layer mask, or Hide All, which will create a black layer mask hiding the entire layer. So let's go to Hide All real quick. It's going to make this current layer invisible. And then you can simply just use your brush tool and paint with white on your layer mask over top of your subjects. So we're just painting with white here over top of our subjects. There we go. Beautiful. Now our subjects are more in focus. Again, this is obviously not the same thing as a photo that was taken in focus, but it's better. So here's our before and our after. And you can see, let's go ahead and full screen this out so you can see this a little more clearly. Okay, here's the before and the after. So you can see our subjects do look more like they are in focus. So that's a little bit of sharpening. Now, this is going to depend on the images that you are actually editing. So some images will require more sharpening, some images will require less sharpening. And again, if you're going to be printing this really large, I recommend a little bit less sharpened, because if you get really close to the image, it doesn't look as good. But as long as you're viewing it from a little bit farther away, you're totally good to go. All right, AJ, awesome question. Congratulations on your pregnancy. Super cool, and I hope this helps out getting your pregnancy photos exactly how you want them to be. All right, cool. Now, Terrell Patel says you can use the camera raw filter as well if you don't have raw images. That's a great point. So let's go back into Photoshop. Now you can also adjust your images using camera raw. So we're going to go to filter. There we go, and down to camera raw filter. All right, let's make sure to filter and camera raw filter. Now this is a really great place to edit your image as well. So even though this is not a raw image, okay, this is not a 16-bit image, you can still use your camera raw filter. So let's say if you wanted to make your image a little bit warmer, okay, using your temperature, you can still do that. You can still bring down information on your highlights. You can still bring up information in your shadows. Again, it's not going to work as well as if you had a raw photo, because a 16-bit raw photo has a lot more information than an 8-bit photo, but it still will work pretty well. And I think just a little bit of warmth added to this will look good as well. And you can apply this as a smart filter on a smart object as well. So that was a really great suggestion from the YouTube audience. All right, let's go ahead and I'm going to group those together. Let's hit F for full screen, and here's our before and our after. I think it did a pretty nice job. All right, cool. Jumping back into YouTube. All right. Man, you guys are so awesome. I'm just reading all the comments here in the chat window. This is, by the way, really exciting for me because this is our first Phlearn live broadcast, so it's super cool to see you guys. I've obviously been interacting with you guys for years and years and years, and we got all your cool comments and all your cool emails and things like that, but this is the first time I've been able to chat with you guys live. All right, really, really cool questions. Okay, now if you're interested in having your questions answered here live on Phlearn Live, simply go to phlearn.com/live. You can upload your photos, you can ask questions, and I can work on them here live. All right, cool. So our next question comes from Kez from Muscat. Asks, what's the best way to take my photography to the next level? I've been taking photos actively for over 3 years, but I feel like I haven't improved a whole lot over that time. All right, Kaz is asking, how can I take my photography to the next level? Well, Kaz, I feel you, man. I have been through the same thing myself. Now, I've noticed in my own life that my photography tends to really jump levels whenever I get super interested in something in my own life, or I have a really creative idea that pushes me technically, something that I have an idea. Let's go back into my own photos here. I'm going to go over to my website here, and I'm going to pull up a photo of something that I did pretty early on. There we go. So if anyone is interested in, there we go. I'm just going to put my, I'm going to put my own personal website. There we go. I'm going to put my own personal website here on the chat box so you guys can get an idea of the photos that I like to take. So this is a photo that I did a few years ago. It's called The Flood. And basically it was based around an emotion that I had. I was in a relationship and things weren't really going right. And I was emotions were just pouring over me. And I wanted to express that in a photo. So I had the idea of a girl in a wedding dress standing on some stairs with a flood of water surrounding that, basically surrounding her. And to do this, I'm okay, well, in my head, that sounds awesome. How am I actually going to make this happen in real life? Now, a lot of people look at this photo and, they're oh, there's a ton of Photoshop and stuff like that going on. But the story behind this is that's actual water that we really did pour down the steps. This photo was taken in an abandoned barn in North Carolina, and we filled like those giant trash cans. We filled a few of those on the second floor and actually poured the water down and completely covered our subject with water. So all this water is actually real. Now the final photo was a combination of several different photos that are brought together in Photoshop, because when we poured the water, she wasn't making a great face, obviously, which if you're being covered in tons of cold water, that makes sense. And then we added some water on the bottom as well. But it was an idea I had. It pushed me creatively, and it caused me to like go outside of my comfort zone. Instead of, just like taking a normal picture of someone, it pushed me to do something different, something I had never done before. And for me, this image was like kind of a turning point in my personal photography, when I realized like I could come up with an idea, just something that I wanted to see, and then translate that into something creative like this. And I found that when I created this image, I cared about it so much, because I was personally invested. I really wanted this thing to turn out how I had it in my head. I was just really, really interested in making this image. So it went from like, if I was just taking pictures of like some friends or family or whatever, I'm not like that invested in that photo. It's like, okay, a photo shoot, and maybe I love the people, things like that, but I wasn't trying to create like a piece of art. And this was one of the first images that I created where I really wanted this exact photo to turn out this way, and it pushed me. I worked for weeks and weeks on this photo, finding our location, getting the dress, working with the model, explaining the concept, like getting approval to pour water down the stairs of this abandoned building. Setting up the lighting. In this case, it's just a medium softbox to the camera left that's lighting this image. It was shot on a Canon 5D Mark II with a 16 to 35 millimeter lens at 16 millimeters. But again, the concept of it and the fact that I was so invested in this photo, it opened up an entire new world of photography for me, something where I could create anything that was in my head. And almost overnight, my photos started to elevate once I had a shift in my own mind on how to do that. So for me, that's one of the big things that made a difference for me. Getting into lighting also made a big difference. Going from working in only natural light, there are a lot of wonderful photographers out there who shoot in just natural light, and I'm amazed by people who do it very well. For me, adding softboxes, adding reflectors and things like that just seemed to add a little bit more polish to my photos. I realized that I could kind of shape my environment and shape how people look through lighting, and I found that really interesting as well. So that was a big step. So if you're currently shooting in natural light, maybe get a relatively inexpensive light, get a softbox. You can even use one that's like a continuous light source. We use strobes here in our studio. Everything we use in the studio is made by Paul C. Buff. We got a bunch of Einsteins and Alien Bees and even some White Lightnings that I bought years and years ago. I don't even think they make them anymore, but that made a huge difference for me as well. So concept-driven photography, really, really big focus on the final image, and also lighting has played a huge role in my own photography. And you can see it here in the rest of my work. This photo is both concept-driven and lighting-driven. So, the light on the subject, these were all strobes. This was photographed in the studio. The strobes had gels on them, which colored the lights. But, relatively simple portrait. We did light a sparkler and then had someone with a leaf blower camera right actually blowing the sparks into my subject's face. This was also real and done in camera, which is, she's pretty awesome. This is Ashley Bremer. But when we were photographing her with the sparkler, by the way, she had her eyes closed. So her eyes were closed while the sparkler was flowing in her face. And then I took a picture of her with her eyes open. And then in Photoshop, I combined those two pictures together to get this final. Cool. That is a great question, guys. All right. I love this. All right. Cool. Just reading all your comments are coming in. Everyone says goofy. All right. And we got 2,000 people watching. That is so cool. All right, cool. We're going to move on to our next question that's coming in from phlearn.com/live. This is Edwin from the Netherlands. Edwin asks, I think the kit lens I used is a bit buggy. For some reason, everything keeps coming out a bit blurry. Also, my finger was in front of the lens. Is there a way to save this picture in post? Okay, well, picture your finger in front of the lens. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at your photos. This is Edwin from the Netherlands. Man, I really like this picture, Edwin. I think, I think it looks really great. One thing that, I definitely will comment on, kit lenses, depending on which kit lens you have, they're called kit lenses for a reason. Usually they're relatively inexpensive, and usually they're not going to be that sharp. What I would recommend using, and I've gone through many different lenses, my personal favorite lenses to use are prime lenses. This means they don't zoom. So like a 35 millimeter 1.4, a 50 millimeter 1.4, an 85 millimeter 1.4. These lenses tend to perform much better than kit lenses do. So if you're currently unhappy with your kit lens, especially if it's a zoom lens, I would highly recommend checking out a prime lens, which is a non-zoom lens. And you can rent these lenses before you buy them. I'd highly suggest renting equipment before you buy it, because you may fall in love with a certain lens or a certain look, or you may realize that that lens or look isn't for you. All right, but let's go ahead and take a look at this. So, a little bit blurry. Now, we can take care of a little bit of blur just like we did for our last photo. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to run through this a little bit quickly here. I'm going to create a layer and go ahead and convert that into a smart object. Next, we're going to go to Filter. We're going to go to Sharpen and down to Unsharp Mask. There we go. And you can see for this image, it's way too sharpened. So I really want to bring that sharpening down. There we go. That's looking quite a bit better. So a little bit of sharpening in Photoshop, you can see it is resolving detail much better. Another thing that you can do, Edwin, just as far as like the photography side of things go, most lenses have a place where they're the sharpest, where they perform the best. And for a lot of lenses, usually that's around f8 to f11. It's going to be different for every single lens. But if you have a lens and you want to know where it's the sharpest, you can type that question in Google, like, Canon 24-70, sharpest aperture. And there are tons of forums and information about that online as well. So if you're shooting at f4 and you're like, oh, this isn't as sharp as I want it to be, chances are if you put it into f8, it's going to be a lot more sharp. All right, so also second part of this question was your finger was over top of the lens on the top right of this image. Okay, so I'm going to do what I can to target this color that we have. This is a little bit of a dark color here, and I'm going to try to convert it more to this color here. So we're going to use a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer for that as well. So let's go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to go to Hue/Saturation and hit OK. All right, let's go ahead and drag this down so we can see what we're doing. So here in my Hue Saturation Adjustment layer, I want to target this color. So I'm going to go to my reds, and I'm going to use my eyedropper tool now to go ahead and select out this color, because we can see it is a different color from the rest of our image. So we're targeting this color. Now, I'm just going to bring up my saturation and our hue just to see, okay, where is this actually affecting? All right, it's definitely affecting the top right of the image. It's also affecting this area down here. So I know I'm going to have to use a layer mask to have it only affect this area. So let's go ahead and bring our saturation back down to 0. Okay, and now I want to make sure that this area, okay, is similar to the other areas that are around it.
The only option I found is make sure on.
My phone is answering a question from Siri. It's pretty awesome. So basically what I'm going to do is I targeted that color now. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit lighter, and I can change the hue of that layer as well, and also the saturation, because the hue is pretty similar All right, there we go. Let's go ahead and lower that down. And I want to find a hue that's pretty similar to the hue of my background. Okay, so first we targeted the color. Now I adjusted the hue, saturation, and made it a little bit lighter as well. Okay, so that looks pretty good to start off with. Now let's go ahead and close out our properties window. Now we can see that affected the color on the entire image. We really don't want that. We just want the area up here on the top right. So I'm going to click on my layer mask and hit Control or Command I to invert that. Okay, and then I want to paint white on my layer mask just where the finger was covering up that part of the image. All right, so now we can see it's definitely starting to help. Okay, I still need to do a little bit more work on this to get it to really blend in. So let's go ahead and double click here. All right, we're going to go back to our reds, which is where we affected our image before. All right, and I want to try to match the hue with the rest of the image. All right, so that's starting to match things a little bit better. Okay, so let's go ahead and close that down. Already we've taken that like finger area. Now it looks a lot more like the trees that are in the background of the image. Now the next thing you'll notice is it's a little bit like muddy. In other words, there's not much contrast in this area. Okay, like here you can see like light and dark. Here it just kind of looks like a big blob. So I'm going to adjust my contrast in that area as well. Let's go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and we're going to go to Brightness/Contrast and hit OK. So we have brightness and contrast now, and I'm going to bring my brightness up, and we're going to bring our contrast up as well. Again, this is going to affect the entire photo. So I'm going to use the same layer mask I used on our Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. I'm going to use the same layer mask on our brightness and contrast layer. So hold Alt or Option, and you can click on one layer mask and move it to the other one. So you can see I've literally transferred a layer mask from one layer to another one. And here I'm able to adjust my brightness and contrast just in that area there. All right, and I can have it match a little bit more closely. There we go. To the rest of the area. So it looks a little bit less of like a blob now. Let's bring our brightness down and contrast down just a little bit. All right, so we're just lightening that area up. I'm going to paint black on my layer mask right there. Okay, and then I'm going to duplicate this layer because I want to go even brighter just on the top right of this image. Let's fill our layer mask with black here. All right, and I'm going to paint white on my layer mask just in the top right of that photo. All right, cool. So there we go. Basically, we were able to target that area. So we started off with a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. Basically, we're targeting the color because your finger was a different color. So anytime you have something that's just a different color than the majority of your image, you can always target that color with a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. So we targeted that color, we changed it back to the color that was more similar to the trees, and then it was still a little bit muddy, so we brightened it up a little bit and added a little bit more contrast. So let's go ahead and take a look at the before and the after. So I'm going to go ahead and group all those. All right, and hit full screen. There we go. So here's our before and our after. And we sharpened the image a little bit as well. Maybe it's a little bit too sharpened. So not a big deal because we made it a smart object. All I have to do is go back in my unsharp mask. I'm going to lower my radius down a little bit. Hit OK. All right. There we go. So here's our before and our after. Removing our little fingerprint and sharpening the image up. All right. Great question. I hope that helped out. Edwin from the Netherlands. What a great question. By the way, I've totally done that a million times, had my finger in front of the lens. So don't feel like you're the only one who has done that. Not a big deal. All right. Laki Itsu says, hi from Chile. Kari says, Tyler, if you go here, T. Tarambo says, Jaylon, are you here? All right. Cool. Basti says, yo, LOL, you are in the way. Tyler, I've been going to every live stream looking for you. I have a feeling you guys aren't interested in this at all. You're just hopping from one live stream to another one. Jaylon's dad. This is so much fun. All right. Hi from Argentina. Hey, Adri. Hi from you as well. All right. Alejandro says, my picture, please. Anka says, love you guys. Sony says, hello from France. Wow, that was a really bad French accent. Hello from Singapore. Afro, what's up? Uric says, yo, Aaron, thanks for the stream. What's up, yo, Eric? Jose says, great. This is so much fun. All right, we're having a great time here, guys. We've still got, so we're at, it's 12 o'clock. We're down with our first hour. So we've got an entire hour left of our first Phlearn live broadcast. I hope you guys are enjoying this broadcast so far. I'm having an awesome time, if that's not totally apparent by now. And if you have a question you'd like answered, head over to phlearn.com/live. There you can submit your question, tell us a little bit about yourself, and you can upload images, and I can work on them here in Photoshop. Oh my God, we got so many awesome comments coming in. All right, I love all of you guys. Hello to all of you guys. Wow. I'm just gonna love you. This is a lot of fun. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into our next question. So our next question comes from Eula from the Philippines. Eula is asking, do you like the new Select and Mask or the old Refine Edge? Many people seem to not like it at all. I'm too new to know the difference. What's the big deal? Okay, so Eula is asking about Select and Mask, which is Photoshop's basically the Refine Edge tool. I thought worked really, really well. Select and Mask is a newer version of the Refine Edge tool. And let's go ahead and jump back into Photoshop so I can give you an idea of what this actually does and how you guys might use it. And I actually am a fan of Select and Mask. I think they've done a great job, and I think Photoshop, the folks at Adobe in general, it seems like they're working harder and harder on making it easier to cut people out of their backgrounds. They're understanding that, you know, folks want to composite photos together, they want to cut people out, they want to create accurate selections, and they're putting a lot of effort into making those tools work very well. So let's go ahead and show you guys how Select and Mask works in Photoshop. So let's go ahead back into Photoshop. I'm going to switch over our images. We're going to go to this guy here. We're going to be cutting him out of his background. All right, so let's go ahead and create a new layer, and we're going to make our other two layers invisible for now. So I want to cut our subject out of the background. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with a very simple selection tool here. We're going to use the Magic Wand tool. So let's hit W for the Magic Wand tool. Now, with this tool, basically I can click here on my background. Okay, I'm going to hold down Shift and click here on this area as well. So we've got a couple selections active here, one on the left side and one on the right side of our subject. Okay, now I can go ahead and click on Select and Mask immediately. So let's go ahead and do that. And we have a selection active from our subject. And we have a few different views that we can choose from. Now, our different views, let's go ahead and bring our property window right over here. Okay, so our different views that we can choose from, this basically helps out whenever you're cutting a person out from the background. So maybe you want your view to be an overlay view. Maybe you want your view to be black and white. And what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing a lot of detail here on my background because that's what I actually selected. It's a lot more ideal to see your subject instead. So I'm going to hit cancel real quick because we started off with the background selected. So Select Masks thinks that that's what we want to see in Select and Mask. But what we're going to do is I'm actually going to inverse this selection. So instead of seeing the background, I'm going to see my subject. Okay, so let's go to Select and down to Inverse. And now we can see instead of the selection being around the background, the selection is around our subject. So let's now click on Selected Mask. And here we can see this is what our subject would look like on a black background. Okay, this is what like an overlay here. We can see what they look like on white, which surprisingly looks the exact same. And here we can see what they would look like on our layers. Okay, so with Selected Masks, the thing I think they did very well, let's go ahead and click on this overlay here. You can paint in your selections with a simple brush tool. This will, basically they added the quick selection tool. Now, I think the Refine Edge brush tool is really, really nice within Selected Masks. So I'm going to start here on my subject skin and paint out towards the background. Okay? And what the tool is going to do is try to figure out the difference between the subject's skin and the background. So we're painting here on the subject's skin and going here over top of the background, and it's going to try to reduce any type of like glow or halo or things like that that we may have in the photo. Okay, so painting over my subject skin. Now, you're going to see a little bit of red coming into this area, and the reason being there is because the original subject, that area was actually white because he had a little bit of edge glow around our subject. So if you want to paint that back, you can simply use the brush tool within your selected mask. Okay, and I can paint back this area as well. So I can simply paint this area back and make sure that my subject, this area does look a little bit more natural. There we go. And let's hit OK there. And now we can see basically it output a selection and refined our edge a little bit better. All right, so now if we want to create a selection, we can create a solid color and put that underneath our subject. All right, there we go. All right, now we have a solid color underneath our subject. So I've done Selected Mask one time. Now you can always go back here and refine it again. So let's click on our layer mask. We can go to Selected Mask again. I'm going to click on Layers, so we'll actually be able to see the layers that are underneath our subject, and it's going to try to blend our subject together with whatever's going on in the background. So it's going to actually add a little bit of like purple into the subject. Now in this example, because we had so much white around our subject, it really didn't look that great. You know what, I'm going to pull up a different image real quick because, all right, because we had a lot of white that was like coming around our subject's hair. All right, let's go ahead and we'll load this image here and we'll use Selected Mask. So obviously anything in Photoshop that's like automatic is not going to be perfect every single time, but the goal is to make it pretty good. All right, let's go ahead into our downloads folder and I'll show you guys how Selected Masks work. It'll work quite a bit better now. Okay, so with this subject, my goal now is to cut out our subject's hair. So let's go ahead and start it off again. We're going to use our magic wand tool, so I'm going to just shift click and select our background. And hair is obviously pretty difficult to cut out from the background. So I've selected out our background. Now I'm going to go ahead and inverse this selection again, so it's not selecting the background. I want it to select our subject. So we'll go to Select and down to Inverse. Now it's selecting the hair. And we're going to go to Select and Mask. There we go. And let's have this be on Layers. There we go. So you can see our magic wand tool did a nice job selecting out the background here, but obviously where we have the hair, this is not doing a very good job, right? It's just choosing the edge of the hair. So here within Select and Mask, you'll want to use your Refine Edge tool right here and start by painting inside the hair. So go ahead and click inside of the hair and then paint your way out. And basically, wherever you start, Select and Mask is going to figure out that's the area that you want to keep. And anything that's different, like you can see the white background is just kind of like disappearing. So it's going to figure out, okay, you want to keep the hair, and what it should do is remove the background from that hair. So even with a complicated image like this, there we go, we're able to make a really nice selection out of the hair. And it did this pretty quickly as well. So let's hit OK there. All right, and go ahead and load that as a layer mask. So you can see now, just zooming into our image, we can see that it did cut out the hair, and we can see it's completely transparent in the areas behind the subject's hair. Okay, let's try loading a layer behind our subject. There we go. And we can see it's not perfect now. You can still see a little bit of like white around the subject's hair. So what we want to do next, we're going to use Selective Mask one more time with our new background in there, and it's going to take the background into account and do a better job cutting our subject out. So clicking on this layer, let's go back to Selective Mask. Okay, we want to start again inside of the hair, and we want to paint it out. And you can see it's doing a better job now, actually, there we go, actually removing those lighter areas and giving us a better selection because it's taking the background into account when you have on layers selected. There we go. Let's go ahead and paint that in there. All right. Cool. And that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and hit OK here. All right, so we can see our subject was on a white background. Now, I realize this is still not perfect, right? We do have these areas that are like, okay, there's supposed to be some hair there, but it's really kind of like light and I don't see anything. Well, there are some things you can do to, for instance, in this area where the hair is a little bit too light, there are some things you can do to darken those areas up. For instance, if I duplicate this layer, so I'm going to hit Control-Command-J to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to change my layer blend mode from normal down to multiply. Okay, so set to multiply, you can see now it's looking a little bit more realistic. What we want to do is I want this to only be visible around the edges of the hair. Okay, so I'm going to group this layer with itself and put a black layer mask on that group, and now I'm going to paint this visible here towards the edges of the hair, because you can see it was a little bit too light, so I want to use a multiply blend mode to just make it a little bit darker and make this blend together a little bit better. There we go. Just around the edges. We don't need to use this multiply layer on the center of the photo. Around the edges where the hair is a little bit too light, this is where we want this multiply layer to show up. All right, and you can do this a couple of times too. There we go. And here on this layer mask, we'll just paint this white. And go ahead and multiply this hair in. And you can see it's getting darker and darker. Now we still have a little bit of, it still looks a little bit like purpley. You guys can see that, I'm sure. So I'm going to use a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. There we go, a Hue Saturation Adjustment layer. I'm going to click on this Colorize button. All right. There we are. And I want to go ahead and colorize it. Excuse me. I want to go ahead and colorize this to the actual hair color. Excuse me. All right, I want to colorize that to the hair color, and then I can clip this to the hair. So you can see using a clipping mask, I can have this affect just the layer of the hair. So you can see it was a little bit purple before, and now I'm turning it into like more of a dark brown color. All right, let's go ahead and shift click on our layers. Here we go. We'll show you the before and the after. So here's our before. This is directly out of Selected Mask, which is pretty good. And obviously I'm doing this quickly, guys. Like this is not, I didn't spend an incredibly long time on this. So that's the before and the after using the Select and Mask. So it did do a really good job making that selection. The hair was just a little bit too light, so I had to darken it down. And we did that by duplicating that layer a few times and setting those layers to multiply, which is going to darken it down. And then at the end, I just changed the color. Instead of being that like purple color, we changed it more to the hair color. All right, and then from here, it's very easy to change your background color because our subject is pretty well cut out. So as I change my background color, you can see our subject should look pretty good on just about any color background. All right. Cool. That was a really good question. Eula from the Philippines. All right. So yes, in general, I do like the Select and Mask. I think it does a really nice job. Basically, the only difference between Select Mask and the older Refine Edge tool, they added like the Refine. They basically added some tools and added a couple more views to the Refine Edge tool and then renamed it Select and Mask. So, awesome question. All right. Cool. Anna Ramirez says, amazing, thank you. All right, and there will be a rewatch. A lot of people are asking, am I going to be able to watch this over again? And the answer is most definitely yes. We will be publishing this as a rewatch, so you guys will be able to watch this at any time. Cool. Adam P says, this is amazing. I wish I was smart enough to pay my bills with my Photoshop skills. John Smith, I think you win the comment of the day. Well, I'll tell you what, there is a huge industry around retouching. A lot of people, when they think about Photoshop, they think, like, okay, I'm going to do all kinds of spectacular effects and things like that. But, realistically, just about any photo that goes into a magazine or, like tabloid or a lot of online publications, most of those photographs, especially of celebrities, are retouched in some way. They do send those photos through Photoshop. So there is a huge, huge industry around photo retouching. I mean, when you think of the hundreds of thousands of images published every single month, there are a ton of retouchers working around the world to make those images look better. So if you are interested in retouching and you want your skills to pay the bills, that's totally realistic. There are a lot of people who earn a really great living retouching. One of my good friends, Pratik Naik, he's of solsticeretouching.com. He's one of those people. He really does a great job retouching, and he earns a full-time living doing so. So it's pretty cool. And I'm also pretty lucky to say that I also earn a full-time living messing in Photoshop, which is pretty cool as well. So it's totally possible, guys. And again, we have, hundreds of free tutorials on Phlearn.com. So if you're interested in learning more, it's a great place to start. All right. Matt Malloy says, what does it say on Aaron's arm? Matt Malloy probably noticed my tattoo. It says, we are what we pretend to be. It's the first half of a Kurt Vonnegut quote. The second half is, so we must be careful who we pretend to be. And for me, it's just basically a reminder, every day you wake up and you get to decide how you want to present yourself in the world, and you get to decide what you think about and how you interact with other people and how you want to live your life. And for me, this is just a reminder myself whenever I'm falling out of line that I basically need to live the life that I want to live. It's kind of like if you've ever heard the phrase fake it till you make it kind of thing, which is real, by the way. It's kind of like that. That's kind of what it means for me. So cool, good question. All right. Cool. We've got a lot of people chiming in. All right. We're going to take our next question. Here we go. I love Kurt Vonnegut. Great tattoo. Thanks, Ronnie. Oh, Edwin says the second part of your tattoo can be on your other arm. It's a pretty good idea. David asks, Aaron, do you have a girlfriend? No, I don't have a girlfriend, but I do have a wife. So, all right. And Hidroy says, hello from Bangladesh. All right. Kay Salehi says, will you possibly make much more advanced tutorials? To answer your question, on Phlearn.com, we do sell advanced tutorials. Currently, Retouching 101 through 301, we can put a little banner on the bottom of the screen. Retouching 101 through 301 is on sale right now. It's our best-selling tutorial of all time. It's over 35 hours of retouching instruction. It's an incredible, incredible tutorial. And yes, it's very advanced, and we include like I think, over 20 images that you can practice along with and learn while you're retouching and learning from videos. You can also practice along with the images as well. So all of our videos that we put on YouTube are generally like relatively simple, get you like into the idea of like retouching and learning about Photoshop and photography and things like that. And if anyone's interested in more advanced tutorials, yes, they are available on Phlearn.com. Cool, great question. I definitely did not intend to do a lot of promotion on this, but you did ask. So, all right. Autumn says, I like your hair. Yoni says 47 images. That's right, it's 47 images. Retouching one of the, you guys know our products better than I do, and I'm the one who makes them. All right. Cool. Ahmed says, I love you very much and your works. Ahmed, I love you too. All right.
Pretty good question up there. What was the biggest mistake you made? What'd you learn from it?
Oh, okay, cool. So someone just asked, what is the biggest mistake that I've made and how did I learn from it? Wow, that's a big question. So for those of you guys, I'll give you a little bit of background. I started in photography, huge interest in Photoshop as well, and through all that, got to like now have a business. So like I'm a business owner, which is like something I never thought I would do. So I think early on, one of the biggest mistakes that I made had to do with people. I had awesome ideas and I'd get really excited about my ideas, and early on, I don't think I did a great job translating that excitement to other people and really understanding that like photography is totally a collaboration. Like, as a photographer, you're one piece of the puzzle, but like whoever you're photographing, whether it's a person or a product or a landscape, like that is another piece of the puzzle. And oftentimes in our photo shoots, and I'm super lucky these days, we've got like wonderful like models and hairstylists and makeup artists and, producers and, there are a lot of people who are involved in our photo shoots. And in the early days, I definitely thought of it as like, the picture comes first and like, this is my picture, I'm creating it, and you guys are just here to create my picture. And over time, I've realized that like, it's not just like, it's not me, it's not just the photographer. Anything you do really is a collaboration between you and the other people that you work with. And I think that, I've had my ass kicked many times, and I think I've, basically just learned through experience. But these days, whenever I look at any type of photo shoot, whether it's in, business or whatever I'm doing, I try to see everything more as a collaboration between people, and that's what it really is. And I try to get everyone who's involved in a process, like in any certain endeavor, whether it's a business endeavor or a photography endeavor, I do my best to try to make everyone feel like they are a part and their voice is heard, and like they're just as important as everyone else in that process. So I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that I've made along in my career, was just not valuing the idea of collaboration as much as I should have. And I hope to continue to value that even more and more, and bring other people up together. So I think working with other people and truly valuing other people and what they bring to the table, I think it just makes everyone better. And that's my goal moving forward. So that's a good question. All right. Someone says maybe this is pre-recorded. Guggle 20. No, it's not pre-recorded. It's definitely live. All right. Cool. Panesh says, I have a crop sensor camera. Can I get professional results? Yes, you most definitely can get professional results. I know plenty of photographers who shoot with crop sensored cameras, and they take beautiful, beautiful photos. Now, your dynamic range might not be as high, you might not have as much detail as like a super nice camera, but at the end of the day, your subject material, the interaction between a photographer and the subject, like the feeling and the emotion and what goes into a photo and what's in front of the photo or in front of the camera, that for the most part is a lot more important than the camera themselves. I know a photographer here in Chicago who makes a full-time living as a fine art photographer, and their work is amazing, and they shoot with a crop sensor camera. You know, they shoot, it's like a Canon T4i, because they take amazing pictures with it, and they just don't need anything else. So throughout working with like gear, and I've worked with tons of different cameras and lenses and things like that, my opinion is it's more important what's in front of the camera and what's behind the camera than the camera itself. So the vision that you bring to an image and whatever you're photographing, those are the important parts. The camera's just the tool to turn that vision into a still image. So yeah, and I mean, come on, you've seen billboards all around town with amazing images shot on an iPhone, right? They're all around Chicago. So yes, you can most definitely take great images with any camera you have. Cool. All right, and I do shoot with a Canon 5D Mark III, but I'm really interested in shooting with a Sony. I've heard really great things on that. All right, my current camera is digital SLR, but the Sony a7R II is mirrorless, and I'm really interested in that. All right. Sapnesh Naik says, why haven't you done any vector portraits? Any tips on those? That is a really good question. Like working with vectors, I know a lot of illustrators who are really great working with vectors. I'm not as good at that, but I think I'd love to bring that to the Phlearn audience. So that would be like a collaboration where we would bring like illustrators and other designers in to teach you those sort of things, because it's not really my specialty, but great question. All right. Crash Boy says, is this your real job? Yes, this is my my real job. Yeah, I'm super lucky. I get to come to this beautiful space every day and work with great people, and I live and breathe photography and Photoshop. Yes, this is most definitely what I do full time. I'm in the office every day from usually around 10:30 till 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night, pretty much every day, 5 days a week. That's super nice. I do get to take some good vacations and things like that. But yes, this is most definitely my full-time job, and I put just as many hours in, if not more, than I would at any other job. Cool, good question. All right. Adri says, do you enjoy shooting, editing, or teaching most? Man, Adri, that's a great question. I really love it all. Each of shooting is so much fun. It's a piece of the puzzle. For me, I love creating final images. That's part of the reason that I shoot. So editing plays hand in hand in that. And then teaching, I mean, man, what a cool way to just, I don't know. I feel like when I get in front of the camera and, teach something in Photoshop, for me, it's like, just sharing the knowledge. And it doesn't even, we definitely spend like hours and hours creating our tutorials. But if I can, put like my time and energy into this tutorial that becomes like online for you guys, then it could wind up like helping out, tens, hundreds, thousands of people. And to me, it's super, super cool. And to see what you guys do with the stuff that we teach, like we teach all kinds of advanced concepts on Phlearn.com, and then to see the images that you guys create, like in response to hey, I learned this on Phlearn.com, like that is the most amazing part for me. I super love it. So yeah, again, it's all about you guys. That's what makes it cool. All right, cool. We got about 30 minutes left, guys. This has been so much fun. Okay, our next question comes from Sarah from Canada. Sarah asks, how do you create a double exposure in Photoshop? That is a great question. All right, Sarah asking, how do we create a double exposure in Photoshop? Well, let's go ahead and let's just do one. Let's do a double exposure here in Photoshop. Okay, so a double exposure, for those of you guys who are curious, is basically like taking two different images that don't have anything to do with each other and combining them together to create something like a piece of art type of thing. All right, so the first thing that I'm doing, and I'm just browsing online, you can see I'm on Adobe stock right now. The first thing that I recommend doing is, and I'm going to do a double exposure with a person and a landscape. So the first thing I recommend doing is finding a person. Let's use this image here. Oh, you submitted a photo. All right, so let's go to that. Never mind. All right, so this is your photo, 7.jpg. Okay, perfect. All right, this is a beautiful photo, Sarah. Let's go back to Adobe Stock, and I'm going to find just like a picture. I want to find like pine trees. Let's find one of like pine trees. All right. Cool. We can use this photo. So a double exposure is, you can do this traditionally with a film camera, obviously, where that's basically just like take two different photos in the same exposure, two different photos on the same piece of film. You can also do this in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and I'm going to open up this photo that I just downloaded of some pine trees. All right, and we're going to bring these together. So this is, Sarah submitted this photo. I'm guessing this is not Sarah. We're going to be adding some pine trees. So let's go ahead and shift click and bring this photo, one photo into the other. Let's hit OK, and I'm going to hit F for full screen. So basically a double exposure is done by using different blending modes, and there are a lot of different ways to do different exposures and a lot of things you can expect to get out of them. So the first thing that we're going to do is, it depends on your layer order and it depends on your blending mode. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to flip through my blending modes here in Photoshop. So to flip through your blending modes in Photoshop, I'm going to hit V for the move key, and then I'm going to hold down Control or Command, okay? Sorry, Shift. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to click through my open and close brackets. All right, and now once I get to lighten, we can see that's basically a double exposure. So we've got our subject here in our foreground, and we can see our subject's on a white background, which is really important. Sarah, you did a great job submitting this image, because with this set to lighten, basically you want to see the outline of your subject. So lighten will work, screen will work. I'm going to continue to flip through my blending modes. So we can go through this. I like this blending mode too. Linear dodge looks good. So keep in mind there's no one way to do this. Basically it's just combining two different images using different blending modes. So I think that looks good. Now let's go ahead and make this photo of the forest a little bit larger. All right, there we go. Now I also find that it definitely works best when the photo has something to do with the subject as well. So for this one, I'm like, okay, it looks kind of like the subject is like outside. You know, that looks pretty cool to me. Maybe he's like looking at some trees and things like that. There we go. I'm going to just zoom out a little bit more. So I'm trying to match the photo with what I think this subject might be, you know, looking at or thinking about or doing. There we go. So that looks good. I'm going to go back to, let's go back to our lighten blend mode. Now, what we can do next is I can lower the opacity on one layer so we can have this be visible only in one area or another area. Okay, we can bring this tree up in there so we can see just by moving this around, we're getting all kinds of different effects with our double exposure. Let me go ahead and flip this horizontally. All right, so you can see the actual process of creating a double exposure is really easy. A lot of it depends on your taste, like, you know, what you actually decide to include or not include in the photo. And the big things you want to keep in mind here are, there we go. The big things you want to keep in mind are, if you're combining a subject and a landscape, you want to make sure that your subject is photographed on a light background. That way you can use blend modes like lighten, and it's only going to be visible where your subject is visible. Now, if I want this to be a little bit less visible over top of his face, what we can do is I can create a levels adjustment layer and have it be visible just on this layer. So let's go to layer, down to new adjustment layer. I'm going to go to levels and hit OK. Now I'm going to just make our tree level a little bit darker and go ahead and close that out. Now with an adjustment layer, this is going to be visible on top of everything. So it's visible on top of my trees and on top of my subject, right? If I clip this levels adjustment layer to my tree layer, it's going to only be visible where my tree layer is. So let's go ahead and right click here on my levels adjustment layer, and I'm going to go to create a clipping mask. All right, so our clipping mask. So you can see this levels adjustment layer where I made this darker is now only visible over top of our subject. So I can go in here and I can make it even darker. And the reason why it's slightly disappearing from my subject, so we've got a couple of concepts kind of keep going on right now. The reason why it's disappearing from my subject is because the blend mode of this layer is set to lighten, right? So if I make the layer itself darker, it's not going to lighten anything. So in effect, what I'm doing is I'm making this layer darker. There we go. Making this layer darker, and it's appearing in less of the photo. Now, this is a really cool part because you can use your blending modes here and adjustment layers together. I can put a layer mask on this layer. Okay, so I'm going to make this layer black. I'm going to hit Control-Command-I to fill the layer mask with black. In other words, the levels adjustment layer that I'm using to make my tree layer darker, I made it invisible by putting a black layer mask on it. So let's say I want this visible only over top of his face, because basically it's going to make his face show through. I can just paint white on my layer mask over top of the face, and it's going to have just his face start to come through the image, which is really, really cool. So we can see just by adjusting, making that area of the photo a little bit darker, now it's starting to show through in my image a little bit more. Now the next thing that I can do is I can group both my tree layer and my dark layer. I can group those together. So I'm going to hit Control-Command-G to group those together. And now I can use a layer mask on the group. So let's click on our layer mask icon, and I'm going to paint black just right over top of his face, just right here, because I'm like, you know what? These trees and things that are like that, they're really, really cool, but I don't want them to be visible everywhere. I just want them to be visible like going up to his face, right? Like I don't want him to actually, I don't want it to cover his face, just right up to the face. So again, what I've done is, let's just make that layer, I'm going to go ahead and make these invisible. So really, really simple here, guys. What we have is our background layer, okay? Again, you want to make sure your subject is dark, and you want to make sure your background is light. That's real important. Or you can have your background be dark and your subject light. Either way, you just need the contrast there. Next, we're going to make our tree layer visible, okay? I've lowered the opacity, and I'm going to change my layer blend mode to lighten. Okay, and lighten makes sure that it's not going to show up in the background. You can see it shows up in the background now. By changing it to lighten, it's only going to show up over my subject because he's dark. We're going to make our levels layer visible, which darkens this area, making it not visible there. And I'm going to go ahead and bring our layer mask in there. So now what we could do, we could make this, I'm going to hit C for the crop tool. Let's go ahead and make it a square crop. Okay, because it's kind of an Instagram-y looking image. There we go. So we have a cool square crop image now. There we go. And now on top of everything, I can do a little bit of color work if I want to. So on top of all this, I'm going to go to Layer, down to New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to go over to Gradient Map and hit OK. Now Gradient Map is cool. Here we can make it black and white if we want to. There we go. And we can choose all types of other gradients as well. So how a gradient map works is basically it takes the darker areas in your photo and assigns them to the left side of your gradient. Okay? The darker areas of your photo get assigned to the left side of your gradient. The lighter areas in your photo get assigned to the right side of the gradient. So right now, the darker areas are black, transitioning, and the lighter areas are white, which makes sense. Now I can click on this gradient and I can have all kinds of other really cool effects on my image too. In this case, the darker areas are blue and the lighter areas are orange. Okay, we can click through all of these gradients and we can see all kinds of different effects here in my image. So I'm able to load these different effects, and with these now we are using, these are all gradient maps, all being used to color this image. There we go. So we have a lot of different options for color toning this portrait. All right, and you can load all of your own colors. If you'd like to add more gradients into your list, if you don't have a bunch of gradients already showing up, you can add more by clicking on this gear icon, and you can go down to here and say, you know what, I'd like to click on photographic toning. And I'm going to hit append, which is going to add this to my list. So let's go ahead and hit append. There we go. And I can scroll down, and all of these are now photographic toning gradients. So you can color tone your image really, really easy. I'm just clicking through these and adding all kinds of really nice color tone to my image. You can also create your own gradients as well. All right, now I'm going to find one that I like. All right, that's pretty cool. So let's hit OK there. I like that. I don't want it to be as strong. Right now it's really taken over my image. So I'm going to just lower the opacity down just a little bit. Cool. And I've got a little bit of color toning going on in my image, which gives it that like nice like Instagram-y type look. Or you could simply just upload this to Instagram and then you'd use an Instagram filter if you'd like to do that as well. All kinds of different things you can do here in Photoshop. So that's a really cool example of a double exposure. So let's go ahead and hit full screen here. I'll show you guys the before and the after of our double exposure. So here's our before and our after. And you can see how easy that was. Sarah from Canada, I hope that answers your question. And I think this image actually turned out pretty cool. So I'm going to save it and put it on the desktop of my computer. All right, cool. I'm going to go back to the chat window and see what you guys are saying. Cool. Ada IP says, this is a great live stream. Thank you. We're doing our best to make it great. Jason says, did he say a nice Instagram-y look? Yes, I most definitely did say that, Jason. Oh, man. Johannes, hey, Brazilian guy. Jason says, there's no such thing as a nice Instagram filter. I don't know if I agree with that, but everyone has their own opinion. I'm a big Instagram fan. I also enjoy professional photography and Photoshop and really nice images too, but I think Instagram is cool for its own use. Cool. Let's see. Do live bloopers. I think we are watching the bloopers live. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this entire broadcast is a blooper. All right. DeFly asks, will you be doing another workshop in the Bahamas? I don't think F-Stoppers is doing Bahamas workshops anymore, but good question. I definitely do accept workshops whenever they're super interesting, and we are in Chicago as well. So if you guys are interested in workshops, we'd love to know. If you do we have anything where they can tell us if they're interested in workshops? Yeah, if you are interested in a workshop, send us an email. Just go to info@phlearn.com. We'd love to know because we're always open. We want to interact with you guys. We want to do stuff, and like these live broadcasts are like a super awesome way. It's just like we can have this interaction, but obviously I'd love to meet you and hang out with you in person as well. So if you're interested in a workshop, please send us an email at info@phlearn.com. All right, Daniel asks, your background is a chroma key or is it real? I don't know, Seth. Why don't you go move that A over there? Chroma key background. Kidding me? Move it around. There we go. Can you do that with chroma key? All right. Cool. Will you stream a tutorial so we can do it all together? Yeah, we're going to be doing tons of live stream, guys. This is our very first live stream, Photoshop live stream, obviously. We're going to be doing a ton of live streaming. We are going, for those of you guys who are interested, we are going to be live streaming a photo shoot on December 7th. So this is our like kind of trial run live streaming photography instruction. On December 7th, we're going to be live streaming a photo shoot from our studio, and it's going to be amazing. I super can't wait. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right. Cool. We have must be a CG background. Yeah, Seth is also CG. I'm actually a robot for anyone who's interested. I'm not even real. All right, cool. We've got time. We've got a couple more questions, guys. All right, Parag, we actually answered that question earlier. We can move on to the next one if you don't mind. Cool. I love you guys too. This is so much fun. All right. Sil Christian Salazar says, "Can I cut your hair?" That depends, Sil. Do you know what you're doing? Yeah, you can cut my hair. Sure, if you come to the studio. Not all of it, but I'll let you cut a little bit of my hair. You can cut this little one right here. Teet, teet, teet. Yeah, you can come cut my hair. I totally don't mind. Cool. Are you from Westworld? You guys are the best, man. Okay. So we've got our next question, and this is coming from Phlearn.com/live, and Blair from Canada is asking, hey, when working on files, they seem to get really big. How do you manage the size of your files? Do you save all the layers as a TIFF, or do you apply the image and create smaller, more manageable files? Oh man, that is such a good question. So files get absolutely huge, and I've got an awesome tip for you guys who are watching this. There's a way you can cheat Photoshop to really reduce your file size. And it doesn't make any sense, but it totally works. So I'm going to show you guys this like really quick, weird tip that you can use to reduce your file size in Photoshop. And this is brought to you from Blair from Canada. Okay, so I'm going to jump into Photoshop here. And I'm going to go ahead and open one of our, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and open a file here. All right, so this is actually from our tutorial, Retouching 101 through 301. So this is the final example. You know what? I'll do this image here. Example. Yeah, we'll do this one here. Okay, so example 2, this is from our, on Phlearn.com, our best-selling tutorial of all time, Retouching 101 through 301. Here's example 2.psd. Now, you can see this is 1.7 gigabytes, okay? Large file. I definitely feel you there. Files can get really, really big in Photoshop. So it's reading this Photoshop format here. All right, and once it's done, we're going to go ahead and see. All right, so this is an example of one of the images that's included in our pro tutorials. I just happen to have it on this computer. Okay, so you guys just saw this image is 1.7 gigabytes, which is it's totally huge. Now, here is the coolest, weirdest trick in the whole world. If you create a layer on top of everything and just make that layer white and save it again, your file size will be reduced dramatically, which is nuts. I can't believe that works, but it totally does. So I'm going to show you guys that. So all we're going to do is I'm going to create a new layer on top of everything. Okay, we're going to go to Edit, down to Fill. I'm going to go ahead and choose White. So we'll fill this with white. Again, so all I've done, we still have all of our other layers, okay? This is not destroying the image in any way. We're actually adding a layer. All I've done is added a layer. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, I'm going to give it a different name, example02_white.psd, and I'm going to hit Save. All right, it's saving in the background. You can see it's saving at 25% there. We'll wait just a minute until this saves here. All right, and you can see this actually is a 16-bit image, so it's a very large image. And remember, the original image was 1.7 gigabytes, which is very, very big. Very, very big. There we go. This is almost done saving here. We're at 60-something%. And again, all I did was create a new layer on the top of everything, and I filled that layer with white, and then I'm just saving this again. All right. It's actually taken an incredibly long time to save because it's a really big image. All right, almost done. So now what we're going to do, when it's done saving, come on, you can do it, example o2_white.psd. Watch, my computer's just going to like blow up in front of my face.
Everybody's calling this black magic and voodoo.
It is black magic voodoo. All right, there we go. So it just saved. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go back to this. So we have our example o2.psd, which is the original one, right? We can see it's 1.7 gigabytes. Now example o2white.psd, oh my God, it's 1.7 gigabytes. All right. I totally lied. Hold on. Maybe this only works with 8-bit images. Sorry. This does work. Let me try it in 8-bit. I know, you guys are lighting it up. You're like, you sold us on this. We hate you now. All right. Give me 1 second here, because this most definitely does work. All right. Example O2. All right, we're going to call this 8-bit. All right, and this should save a lot quicker, too. I have done this before, although it obviously is not working right now. All right, so I'm going to save this again as example O2. And if it doesn't work this time, then I've got a totally different answer for your question. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and see it now. So we're just going to switch here. I'm going to open a new window. All right, let's go to our, there we go. Okay, so example O2, it did. Okay, so example O2 8bit.psd is 1.3 gigabytes. And example 8bit_white, where all I did was added a white layer, is 1.29 gigabytes. So that just reduced the file size by 400 megabytes, guys. That's pretty big, because when you think about a gigabyte, 0.1 gigabytes, that's 100 megabytes. So that by adding a white layer on top of everything, it reduced our file size by 400 megabytes. And again, it doesn't seem like this works in 16-bit images, but it does work in 8-bit images, which is really interesting. So that's my answer to your question, and obviously it did not work as well as I thought it would, but on 8-bit images, this does work very well. Now, we also, as far as like file storage goes, we have like Pegasus RAID arrays here in our studio. Just pull this up. R8. These are relatively pricey. Obviously, I know that it's relatively pricey. If you can they see my screen now? Okay, cool. I know these things are relatively pricey, guys. This is what we use here in our studio as like our main working drive. So we have a 24 terabyte Pegasus R8, and basically anything we throw at this thing, it works very well, and it's incredibly fast too, which is great, especially because obviously we run like a photography and Photoshop studio, but everything we do is video. So we're also a video production studio as well. So we do a lot of video work, and this thing does a really, really great job with it. I know it's not inexpensive, but it really is a very powerful hard drive. So the other thing that you can do is if you have files that are a couple of years old and you don't think you need to go back to the PSDs or something like that, you can always convert those from 16-bit down to 8-bit, and you can remove, like, when you're going through a photo shoot, let's say you have a bunch of photos, if there's photos you know you're not going to use, you can go back through and delete those too. So there are a lot of things that you can do to reduce your load over time. And then we have like older files, stuff that's like a couple of years old. Usually what we'll do is we'll throw all that stuff on like relatively inexpensive hard drives, and then just throw those in a couple locations. So like in our storage room, for instance, we have hard drives full of like stuff from years and years ago that's like, it's backup if we need it, but it's not taking up space on our current used hard drive. So yeah, I'm a big fan of just keeping things around because you never know when you're going to need it, but storage does get pretty expensive. Also, Amazon Glacier is a great way to store your photos, and it's relatively inexpensive. So we also use that as well for our online storage. Yeah, I hope that helps. Cool, good questions, guys. All right. Oh, Rick says, we're here for blooper number 1. Yeah, that was blooper number 1, the whole 16-bit with the white layer. Welcome to blooper number 1. Okay, great. Okay, Gideon from Wales asks, what are some retouchers and photographers that are worth checking out? Whose work inspires you? Well, we've got a lot of books right behind me from photographers that inspire me. Gregory Crutzen, I'll just type in Gregory Crutzen. He's an amazing photographer. My favorite photographer is David LaChapelle. He does absolutely nutso stuff, and I totally love it. As far as retouchers go, Pratik Naik, that's Solstice Retouching. Let me just... All right, let me pull up his website, and I'll go ahead and link to it. Yeah, Pratik is a good friend of mine. Very, very nice guy. And there we go. And he does some really, really nice retouching work as well, so you can check out his work there as well. So yeah, there's a few of my favorite photographers and retouchers. Gideon, great question. All right, cool. Well, we are almost out of time, guys. It's 1 o'clock here. I'll answer a couple more questions here from the chat room. All right. We inspires you. You guys do inspire me, Aaron. Blooper number 2. You inspire me, Aaron. Retouching portraits. Well, honestly, the best way to learn retouching, we have a lot of free retouching tutorials on Phlearn.com. You can just type in retouching in the search bar. And our tutorial, Retouching 101 through 301, is on sale right now as well. It's over 35 hours long of retouching, and I know I'm talking about a product that we sell, but it really is a wonderful tutorial, and it really will turn you from like, I don't know anything about retouching, to wow, I'm really good at retouching now. So I think that's a great place to start. All right, guys, thank you so much. You are so much fun to hang out today. We are going to be doing more live broadcasts in the future. So this is our first live broadcast. We're, like basically using this as like a little bit of a test field and a way to interact with you guys and work on your images as well. For those of you who are interested, we are doing a live broadcast of our photo shoot. So this will be our first photo shoot live broadcast. It will be on December 7th. So we've got a wonderful model. Ian Elkins is coming to Chicago from New York. He's like a retoucher and photographer / model / professional BMX guy. He's totally awesome. You can find him on Instagram at Ian Elkins. He's going to be coming to the studio. We're going to be doing 3 photo shoots on December 7th. We've got some amazing concepts, and we're going to be, right now, cameras just on a tripod and stuff like that, but we're going to have camera operators here and do complete coverage of the photo shoot live for free on December 7th, and that's going to last all day long. So this is, again, our first live broadcast, and I think it went pretty dang well. So thank you guys for tuning in. I had a great time. I hope you had a great time as well, and we're going to be doing more and more live events in the future. So this is just a taste of things to come. All right. Well, I think we're good to go. I guess I should just sign this thing off. Oh, okay. Actually, yeah, let's answer a couple questions about the live broadcast. So, because Adrian just asked, what program are you using for the live stream? Can we switch to the webcam view? Yeah. What program are we using for the live stream? So we are using a program called Wirecast. By the way, this is our first live stream, obviously, and we had to learn a lot to actually like figure out how everything is done. So we're using a program called Wirecast. It's made by Telestream, and so far it's working out really well. You can put multiple cameras and audio sources into the live broadcast. So right now we've got a webcam hooked up. We've got a Canon C100. So anytime you were like seeing my face in full color, that's a Canon C100 Mark II. Anytime you're looking at this big black and white image, which you're looking at right now, that's just from our webcam. We've got a couple audio sources here. I'm mic'd up. We've got a shotgun mic, and those are both going into a little board. Can you point to the board right there, Taylor? Yeah, that's like a USB audio interface board we're using to master all the levels and things like that. And then we have these really nice, actually, Taylor, would you mind in that box over there? There's a little black magic box. It's gray. It's like this. Yeah, in there. It's just like a little gray box. Would you mind bringing that to me and then switching the broadcast to this camera? Cool. So they can get a better idea of what this is, because you guys can do your own live broadcasts as well. So this thing, these are really not even that expensive. It's made by Blackmagic Studio. This is called an Ultra Studio Mini Recorder, and what this does is it takes HDMI in and it converts it to a Thunderbolt out, which is really cool. So basically, the feed coming from our Canon C100, which you're watching me right now, most cameras, video cameras and still cameras, will do an HDMI out. So we're going from the Canon C100 through HDMI. So we've got an HDMI cable going from the Canon camera into one of these, and then Thunderbolt on the other side. And this is connecting to a Mac Pro that we have here that we're using to actually do the live broadcast. So if you have like a 5D Mark III or a video camera, you can pick one of these up, and that'll transfer the signal to Thunderbolt, and then you can do a live broadcast from your laptop or an iMac. In this case, we have a Mac Pro because we're doing multiple different streams, and we didn't want it to crash, so we're using a more robust computer. But these things are available. I don't remember how much it was, but it wasn't that expensive, probably $100 or $200. So that makes it really easy as well. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it as far as like the audio and video setups go. So currently we've got one webcam and a C100. For our photo shoot on December 7th, we're going to be using a few different C100s as well, and broadcasting from those. So all relatively simple. You basically just plug all your inputs straight into your computer, Wirecast, and you can pull them up as different layers and stuff like that. And we've got some like on-screen overlays and things like that. They're easy to create, and you guys can make your own live streams as well. So I hope this helped out, guys. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. This was so wonderful. I wish we could stay on for just like all day long so I could answer all of your questions. But I hope you had a great time and learned some things too. I think some of my favorite things, that double exposure thing, that actually did work out pretty cool. So thanks, Susan, for submitting that portrait. That was really, really cool. And guys, thank you so much for watching this live broadcast. Join us again on December 7th for our live broadcast of a complete photo shoot. It's going to be free, and it's going to be all day long. All right. Thanks so much, guys. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone. Yeah, let's just switch into the webcam view for a second, and we can cut my audio.